Okay, so we're back. So I want to have a good break. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how have mentioned burnout and taking breaks and stuff while we were on break is kind of interesting. Someone I know from the local community here in Dallas had really burnt themselves out really bad from they were working as a pen tester and red teamer for their day job, and they did a lot of side work. Yeah, yeah, that's correct, Lily. Yeah, I knew he'd been having problems, but he really hadn't said. And so he kind of figured out how things what was wrong. But yeah, he was doing so much hacking on pen tests and putting in so many long hours. He just got to where he had some physiological disorders and some burnout that just prevented him from being able to do his job, which he's bouncing back from and has had to, has wisely so kind of cut back on overdoing what he was doing. So that's just kind of a good point there. I think most people won't run into that, but some people that are just really, if you get really obsessive compulsive type behavior and you're really put in long hours and just, obsessed, then, the kind of thing can happen. But definitely a good reminder why we need to take breaks. So yeah, it's actually interesting with about this person, Lily Tinker. I actually knew him when I first met him in 2013. He was a technical recruiter. So just kind of showing people, they get in this field, they start from all different types of areas. And he's the one I'd shared that started out as a SOC analyst and then moved into pen testing. So we're going to get started back here. Let's see. So AD on-prem or on-prem AD attacks to gain privileged access to Azure. So you can use on-prem AD to get access to Azure. So although on-prem administrators don't usually have admin rights to Azure AD, they can have access to crucial information such as AD content, ADFS, Active Directory administrators of these services can easily get admin rights to Azure AD to manipulate and impersonate users. So we'll take a look at a little more detail on this type of attack. So there's the link to the article, our trusty 065 blog. Okay, so another Office 365 blog entry for us to look at here. And so there's kind of the first section we kind of covered in that slide, but in this blog, ADD internals version 0.4.0, they'll show you how to get global admin access and how to impersonate users as an on-prem administrator. So Azure AD Connect. So Azure AD Connect or AAD Connect is a tool for implementing hybrid identity. Typically, it is configured to do the following: synchronize users, groups, and devices from on-prem AD to Azure AD, synchronize password hashes from on-prem to Azure AD. When AAD Connect is configured, it creates service accounts both in Azure AD and local AD. These services accounts and their passwords are stored in a configuration database, typically on the same server as AD Connect. The service account created in Azure AD is named as follows. So you can see here the naming convention for that. Server refers to the name of the server running AAD Connect in random string to a 12-character random string, and tenant name to the name of the Azure AD tenant. This account is giving directory synchronization accounts role. Obviously, this role has at least the following rights: reading, creating, modifying, deleting users and other objects, setting passwords. However, the user with directory synchronization account roles tries to create a user with MS Online or Azure AD module. The following error is given. So we see here that access denied. You now have permission to call this commandlet. This indicates the synchronization is not using the provisioning API nor Azure AD Graph API. Instead, it's using an API which they call simply synchronization API, which endpoint is so admin web service.microsoft.com. AD internals have had support for synchronization API since the early versions. So the API and corresponding AAD internal functions allows you to modify the users and their passwords. So here they're showing dumping Azure AD Connect credentials, assuming the AAD Connect is using a local configuration database. Dumping credentials is very straightforward. Just install the AAD internals module and export the credentials. So here you can see that the information about the tool. And so you can see the information that's dumped. So company name, user password, AAD user, and AAD user password. So this gives you the AD credentials and the AAD user credentials. So modifying users, now that we have credentials of AAD Connect, we can modify users and their passwords. First, we need to get an OAuth access token. So you can see the syntax for that. So $creds equals get credentials. Say the credentials to a variable. So this is going through like a PowerShell tool. Get an access token and save to cache. So get AD access token for AAD graph credentials and say using the creds variable there and save to cache. These are two ways to list user AAD internals. First is using the synchronization API, which can show all synced objects. So it shows the different things that it offers there. There's different objects it shows there. Select principal name, another source, cloud anchor, sort principal user. So you see the output of that. We see the user principal, which is their email address that they use for the account, the source anchor, and the cloud anchor. So the values such as user principal name are original values from on-prem AD, not from Azure. AD to demonstrate, let's get a list of users using provisioning API. So this output should be something similar. From the output, we can see the source anchor matches immutable ID, and anchor matches object type and object ID. The user Joni S company.local from above has a different principal username. So we see the principal name here that Joni S has in Azure compared to the AD. So the difference you're going to see a lot of times with these, you're seeing the actual Microsoft domain names. So we see the object IDs and the immutable ID. So the immutable ID is base 64 encoded. So one of the ways, that I always look at when I'm looking at encoding with these two ending equal signs is usually a good indicator. So therefore, users with immutable ID are cloud-only users, and not only show the when listed in sync, such as we can modify with users synchronization API if we know their other immutable ID source anchor. So we're running this syntax. It's the source anchor and the display name. And so display names have I've been hacked, so you're getting error there, error details, user success, and so the result description, and then we're getting the immutable ID or the anchor source, which maps to that immutable ID. We can also reset users' passwords because only the hash of the password is sent to Azure AD. Password restrictions are not applied. This means that we can use a long as we want password, we can use as long passwords as we want to. A nice trick is also possibly setting a password change date to anything we want. So the result is 0 that we changed was successful. So here we're going to interchange the password to the new password. So it's successful. Getting global admin rights. So the first step pursuing global admin rights is to list the current admins. So we're listing the current admins using the get AD int global admins, and the output should look similar to this. So we see a list of the display names and the principal names. So sometimes the global admin is a user which is synced from the on-prem AD. Example, Joni Sherman from above. In this case, the password can be changed in a similar way as in our previous example, provide the domain that is managed, not federated. But what if you want to reset the password of cloud-only administrators? At the end of May 2020, the author discovered the synchronization API can be changed to reset also cloud-only users' passwords. The trick is to use the cloud anchor instead of the source anchor. So using the previous example, we can change the password for admin at company.onmicrosoft.com, as we know the Azure AD object. Azure AD object. So we're using the cloud anchor instead. Before we used, as they mentioned, okay, so the cloud anchor ID there, cloud anchor. So result is 0. We can see the successful. So that they changed that syntax there. So the password. So the result is 0. The changed password was successful. We can log in as global administrator. So note this is not expected behavior. A synchronization should not have access to cloud-only users. Similar issue where on-prem accounts could be synced and linked between existing Azure AD users was fixed in 2018. Now only non-admin users can be linked. So they reported this to this issue to Microsoft on May 29th, and they're working on a solution. So password resets can only work if password reset works only if you have the password hash synchronization enabled. Luckily, AAD Connect service account can turn it on. The following command just sets PHS switch in Azure AD. It doesn't start the actual PHS sync. So we see it's enabled. So you're setting enable to true. So pass-through authentication. So Azure Active Directory pass-through authentication is an authentication method allowing users to sign in to on-premises and AD or Azure AD Office 365 using the same credentials. Technically, as a service, Microsoft AD, Azure AD Connect authentication agent running on a Windows server. If PTA is used, one agent is always installed on Azure AD connecting server. For high availability, extra agents can be installed on the server. For short, when users signing in, their credentials are sent to the PTA agent for verification. The agent tries to log in, and the provider provided credentials and return result back to Azure AD for more. There's a blog post for more information there. Harvesting credentials and letting everyone in. So they're using the PTS SPY utility for harvesting credentials. So, hey, Joseph, good to see you here. Yeah, you'll have access. They're recording the boot camps. And also the original content that this was based on, which has been recorded and just going through the production process, that'll be available as well. So yes, this content will be available. And as I mentioned, anyone going through this course, I would go back and take the other online course once it's available. Sometimes people explain things in a certain way, and you get to, it's also the original content creator that teaches that. So, so this is a PTA SPY that's for harvesting credentials. So it creates a hidden folder as labeled here, PTA SPY, copies the PTA SPY DLL, injects the PTA SPY DLL to Azure Connect authorization agent process. Then we install the PTA, when installed PTA SPY, accepts all passwords, save the usernames and passwords to this PTA SPY directory. And this is probably the file in that case. So run the following command on the computer, running AAD Connect in standalone authentication agent. So here's how it's installed. The installation asks you to confirm the installation. Continue by selecting yes. So you can see where the input where they're asking you to select yes or Control-C to abort. If installation is successful, you'll see the following. Installation is successful. So all password and credentials now collected to, so it actually creates a CSV file that you can open up in Excel or whatever your favorite spreadsheet tool, and you're able to view the content of those passwords. So note if installation fails, this is probably due to missing Visual C++ 2015 redistributables. Now, whenever someone tries to log in, any password accepted is saved to the log, such as PTA SPY can be used as a backdoor and credential harvester. So this is the kind of stuff an attacker may do once they get, initial foothold in the system, is to put things like in this place to be able to collect more credentials. Because something they have, if they lose a certain login, if they're able to collect other credentials, log in as other users. Maybe they've been operating under this one account, and then they want to switch accounts to further their activities without looking as suspicious. Because if you're seeing one account doing all these things, then that may cause some suspicion. So having other credentials is kind of helpful for a pen tester and attacker. So now when someone tries logging in, so we got the passwords, you can dump the passwords. So the command is get AD int PTA SPY log. And so this gives you the credentials from that log. So passwords are base 64 encoded unitext to show the encoded passwords. So it decodes it. So you use this to decode the passwords. So up here we see that it's encoded. And remember, encoded is not the same thing as encrypted, but it is obfuscating the passwords. And so you can go through and decode it. So note when the Azure AD Connect authentication agent service is restarted, PTA Spy is unloaded and must be reinstalled. So Federation Services, ADFS, Azure, or Microsoft 365 support various authentication methods, of which federated identity is one. Typically, the federation is implemented using Active Directory Federation Services, ADFS, which one of the roles of Windows operating systems, server operating systems. For short, identity federation is based on a trust between on-prem ADFS and Azure AD. During authentication, ADFS creates a SAML token, which includes information about the user principal name, and immutable ID. The SAML token is signed, and with a token signing certificate using the private key known only by the ADFS server, token validity is checked using the public key and the token signing certificate known both as ADFS and Azure AD. As explained in a previous post, Azure AD is using only immutable ID for identifying the user. So as long as the SAML token is properly signed and corresponding immutable ID is found on the server, the user is logged in. In practice, if you have the token signing certificate, you can log in as any user of the tenant. So some pretty interesting stuff that you can do with Azure AD. Just amazing how complex these different technologies can get. So exporting token signing certificates. So they said if you have that signing certificate, then you can log in as any user on the tenant. So assuming ADFS is using local configuration databases, dumping the token signing certificate is very straightforward. Just install AAD internals module and export the certificate. So they're showing the install the module and then import module AAD internals and then export AAD and ADFS signing certificate. So if no name is given, the certificate is exported to the current directory as ADFS signing certificate PFX with the empty PFX password. Note the certificate is renewed by default once a year. For persistence, the certificate with longer validity period should be used. So they show here you could use like up to like 10 years, or that may be example. I don't know if that's the limits, but so something like that, something to keep in mind. But also when you're doing your pen test, when you do things like that, keep notes. So the blue team, well, not the blue team in this case, the system administrators or the administrators of that environment can go back and remove things and undo things that you've done. Because if you leave something exploited, then someone else can come along and find that exploit and use it. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'd heard a podcast from Black Hills Information Security not long ago where they were doing a pen test and they found like someone had set C2 up and they didn't expire their beacons. And so they were able to get a shell and gain access to the system without much effort because that was still left in place. So when you're using these tools, you want to make sure that you're taking proper care to document things so they can be undone. If you're using certain types of C2 where you can control the number of time, and even when they were mentioning for persistence, setting it for 10 years, if you're doing one pen test, then you're really not going to need to extend past a year. If you need to go back and if you need to go back and retest within a year, you can just try to do this exploit again. And if it's no longer vulnerable, they fixed it, then that's a good thing. So creating SAML tokens for synced users using users from previous example, we can now create valid SAML tokens. So first, if not known, you also need ADFS identifier, which is typically a URI. So get ADFS properties, piping up using the select identifier. So this gives us the select identifier. Works pretty much like the pipe command in Linux, kind of like when you're grepping stuff. It's kind of working like a grep feature actually. So we see the identifier, and now we have all the needed information, and SAML tokens. A SAML token can be created. By default, the token is valid for 1 hour. So this shows how to create the new SAML token. You can see how it's, once again, it's being encoded here, the immutable ID. So with the SAML token, we can now get an OAuth access token to be used with AAD internals function. So get an access token for Exchange Online. So they're creating that and sending that to the SAML variable, send message using Outlook. So this has got that sense of urgency to take advantage of the victim. You can now open Office 365 portal with the signature, with the signing certificate. The following command creates HTML file in temp and opens it in Internet Explorer in private mode. So creating tokens for cloud-only users. The ADFS administrator has access to Azure AD Connect. They can set immutable ID for any cloud user source anchor. This way, SAML tokens can be created also for cloud-only users. And the funny part is that immutable ID doesn't have to be base 64 encoded GUID. It can be any string. So set immutable cloud-only users using the following example from above. So here they see it's not encoded here. And so here's the output for that. So now we can create SAML tokens using the source anchor as immutable ID. And so Active Directory and desktop single sign-on or seamless SSO single sign-on. Okay, so everyone's kind of quiet today. So notice we don't have Michael with us today. Friday vibes. It makes me think my favorite meme is the vibing cat now, the little white cat, and they'll play the different music in the background. That's one of my favorite Slack emojis too. Can you discuss? So let's see. David says, can you discuss and show some network attack vectors for cloud pen testing? Yeah, actually, I don't have anything on that, because this kind of just kind of the structure of this course is really, yeah, the type of attack vectors. They really didn't get into much of the network related stuff. They just kind of pick the things that are more common, more high impact when they created this. But some of the things you could do there is if you had like a a hybrid cloud, then some of the things that you use for traditional on-prem Active Directory, and then use some of these things to gain access to Azure, so that could be used there. Yeah, so this course hacking Azure AD is available in our backend course section. It will be available. I'm not sure on the production cycle how quickly it takes them to get the videos out there, but it was with creating this course, the ELS or e-learning security content that is being converted, and now I&E content. Uh, the way ELS did stuff, they had tons of slides, and so for this course, since the I&E way is more video, less slides, I had to go through the videos for the course and actually just kind of watch the videos and get prepared for the boot camp. So that will be coming out. And so cloud is like a major focus on things. So look for more cloud stuff to be coming out too. And this is attack vectors too. So this is great content. This is great stuff here, but there's kind of some assessment pieces like your vulnerability scanning and that sort of stuff, because there's tools like CloudSploit. I did an Azure cloud pen test back late December, early January, and I was using something like CloudSploit, and CloudSploit I think may have changed the name of the tool. Let me look that up real quick. So I used that on the pen test because it does like vulnerability scanning. So there's kind of some assessment pieces that you might do in a pen test. And this course is getting more into the realm of the attack vectors or a red team approach to doing a pen test. So CloudSploit. So there's like an open source. I use the commercial version. So for anyone who want to do this is the open source version. They have a commercial version. And this also works on AWS too. So it's not just, so yeah, whenever I went through it just, CloudSploit is now Aqua, Cloud Security Posture Management. So I'm not sure if that stayed the same for the open source version or not. Let me see if there's a way just to get to the GitHub repo. So yeah, there's this open source piece, so you can do that. So you can kind of see some of the output from your scans. And pretty much with the commercial version, you're getting a nicer, you're getting like a web interface to view these reports and stuff. And so this is kind of what CloudSploit does. So it's a tool that you can check out. So yeah, so like I was mentioning, this is kind of more of an advanced Azure pen testing course. And so there's some prerequisite stuff like your assessments. So if a company paid me to do, or a company I work for to do a cloud pen test, then a lot of cases you're going to start out with something like this. A lot of these techniques and stuff of this course, this would be something if you were doing a red team engagement for a company. This is a way, and the way they try to conduct these attacks, they try to do it as quiet as possible. So this could be something that could be part of a red team engagement. So like I was saying, this content's more of an advanced pen test or red team. So yeah, you can set this up, and this CloudSploit also tests AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, and also Oracle. And so it's kind of, it's almost one of the ways to think about it. It's almost like the Microsoft Security Baseline Analyzer tool that I'm not sure if Microsoft still makes that, but then also like the computer benchmark standards, where you're able to go through and run security scans against servers or network devices, and it will go through and check to see if certain things are configured. It does almost like a configuration review of certain settings, that you're able to easily see that and go back and remediate those. And tools like this kind of make it easier to quickly secure some things, because these are just running certain security checks to fix things that might be exploited. But some of these vulnerabilities that come out, something like this, this tool, someone could come out with something to exploit that this might have missed. So doing the more manual testing and some of these attack techniques are a way to fill in the gaps. But this is a tool that you could use for cloud pen testing. While we're on the subject of tools, let's see. Power Azure is another one. This is from Hasek. He works for SpecterOps. He's got a really good blog too. Any of the stuff by him, his Medium account is a good one to follow. He's got a lot of stuff on hacking Windows environments, and it's not all Azure. He's got a lot of good AD stuff. And so this Power Azure tool, so it's PowerShell based. So it's created to assess and exploit researches within Windows cloud platforms. So this one it's more Azure specific, unlike CloudSploit. So you'd run something like CloudSploit, and then you could run something like this. So the tools to be able to find the vulnerabilities, this kind of gives you an idea of what areas to work on. A lot of the techniques that Slavi had come up with or found during his research for this course could be used, as you find these different things. So when you're starting a pen test, you're starting out more the assessment phase.